Hello, Vincent. How are you? Thank you for being with us here. I hope everything is okay with you. And as a matter of fact, I like to ask you a few questions so that we can have your opinion on certain geopolitical questions which are extremely contemporary, which are extremely actual, and I think you could add a bit to our understanding of certain situations that are, of course, connected with the interests of the European peoples nowadays. Well, the first question is about the Ukrainian situation and regards the fact that the Ukrainian president's office published recently a report on Zelensky's salaries for last year. And it seems that what they are saying is that Zelensky's salary was more than 300,000 euros. Even the head of Germany, which is Europe's richest country, Frank-Walter Steinmeier, earned 100,000 euros less. The difference is that only Germans pay for Steinmeier, while Zelensky's salary is paid by the whole European Union. Why do you think Zelensky is so costly? Why is he being so costly for the Europeans? And do you think that Zelensky is really being paid to be a real president, or is he just an actor?
Yeah, well, I do think when you're a leader of a nation, you should be, of course, be compensated, and maybe even more generously than, yeah, the current way many people think about politics. But at the same time, you, of course, also have to be a great leader, a leader that cares about its own people and plays an active role, of course, in making things better for the country. So you can only get what you've earned, and Zelensky hasn't earned anything. He isn't the leader Ukraine now needs. He is a puppet of the liberal orders. Of course, he gets paid for that. Well, I do believe it's the case that most of the money, I've looked it up, most of the money was from him selling government bonds. I also think he probably made a lot of more than what was officially declared. It's at this moment, it gives the wrong impression to receive such money while being at war and while your own people are struggling. Also, when looking at history of his income, we see an increasing trend. So just like I just said, his income increased because he had to include some sort of sell-off of government bonds. And this is because of the new supposed transparency law they probably have to include because of EU regulations or NATO regulations or some sort of things. But who knows what else he has that he has not required to declare. So only the current things of the new transparency law were included. But at the same time, I think it's much worse because the current government of Ukraine should be in full panic mode at the moment. Now, Trump stated that all the money the United States gave to Ukraine was a loan. They need everything they have to repay the USA. So in that way, you could maybe say that the net closed and now Ukraine has a debt that it cannot pay back. And in that case, even with Donald Trump, you could say that the liberal order got exactly what they wanted. They made Ukraine dependent on them, and they are very successful with their puppet president.
Well, meanwhile, the new German government of the CDU and the SPD wants to take away the passports of a part of the German population. According to a statement on the coalition talks, politicians could revoke the citizenship of so-called extremists who do not support the current government. Well, this is somewhat similar to the policy enacted by Nazis decades ago, who gave some citizens an Aryan certificate and others a yellow star. Do you think that this kind of policy could mean a kind of return of the German government to a kind of authoritarian or totalitarian or even a kind of Nazi format? And do you think that Friedrich Merz's policy could lead to the emergence of German refugees?
That they want to withdraw citizenship from citizens due to extremism. And this, at the moment, could of course only be done with people with dual passports, but it could be the first step. It is very problematic because really think because of the different understanding the current German elites like Metz have on extremism. First, I wouldn't call it and compare it with Nazism, what they are doing, because the current ideological framework Germany positions itself in is liberalism, and their political structure is liberal democracy, and that is already as bad as it is. Many people have a different idea on what liberalism is. That's why people say words like fascism or Nazism as synonyms of totalitarianism or authoritarianism. But liberalism is also authoritarian or maybe even totalitarian. Because we now see a disconnect because between the supposed liberal idea of freedom on the one side, and on the other side, like freedom of expression and freedom of thought, and on the other side, a more authoritarian way of thinking in the liberal world. And I think to assess this question deeper, we have to look at the history of the current political structure in Europe, especially the way European leaders and also previous American leaders and intellectuals viewed the post-Cold War world order. We all, of course, know the book by Francis Fukuyama, At the End of History and the Last Man. In this book, Fukuyama talks about the main way of thinking of this supposed new world that was emerging. He stated that history was over and the ideological struggle of the 20th century is also over. We now will move to a more peaceful world where nations would evaporate, globalism would be everywhere, and liberal values and human rights would be adopted by, I think, everybody. And it's famously said, and we all sing Kumbaya around the campfire. It was not liberalism that has won the struggle for history, because the other two ideologies were defeated by other means. We know that fascism was, of course, defeated by an illiberal military force, and the Soviet Union has collapsed by itself. But they stated that the liberal ideology would always have won because it was so self-evident. It would even be a new step in human evolution. Now, we of course now are 30 years in the future, and we now know this is of course nonsense. Even Fukuyama stated that in his current understanding in the world. But many of those liberal elites still think that way. They cannot conceive an illiberal world or world order. Liberalism is the only option for them. And I think this way is especially apparent in Germany because of the trauma of the Second World War. Their worldview of German leadership is very simplistic. It's either liberal democracy and globalism, or you will get a new Hitler. But that's of course wrong. History is not finished, and of course anything remotely right-wing or nationalist is not a new Hitler. And then, of course, the second question comes to mind, I think here, how can they claim legitimacy while still claiming to be liberals that are tolerant? And how could they claim that to be tolerant and at the same time they are intolerant to other people? The solution here is the so-called paradox of tolerance. People may know this. It's a paradox was created by the liberal philosopher Karl Popper, and he stated that in order for liberal democracy to survive, there must be some sort of distinction between tolerant people and intolerant people, because the intolerant people, in his view, would destroy this liberal democracy and this project they are working on. Tolerant people, as in they call themselves liberals, should not have to be tolerant to the intolerant people. And they could also take measures to limit their rights and of the intolerant people. And that's what we are seeing in Germany right now, with all these actions of AFD. It sounds so simple, of course. You can be tolerant against intolerance, but it is totalitarian reasoning. Because who defines tolerance? Of course, liberals will do that. And this process is exactly the same as the other authoritarian ideologies of the modern age used to ban their opposition. It's the same thing that fascism did, the same thing that communism did. While like I said on the taking away of passports of immigrants, I don't think that's a problem in its own way. Um, but the problem here is that at the same time that liberals claim to be tolerant to everybody, well, they are not. At the same time, they claim that liberalism is what defines Germany. That's of course not true. Germany defines what it is to be German. The people of Germany defines what it is to be German, not some sort of international ideas of globalism and liberalism, liberal democracy. And at the same time, we see that liberalism has destroyed Germany and Europe and the United States. So if you're actually, so we now get this some sort of situation where you're actually actively trying to prevent Germany to commit suicide even more, you could get your passport taken away. It's of course nonsense. This is one of the many authoritarian ways the liberal order uses to try to keep control in a rapidly changing world. We now see, of course, the world is changing with Donald Trump, with Russia, with China positioning themselves. Um, and we see all this all overall of Europe, and that's of course quite hard because maybe we could see um, we could see refugees from Germany going to other countries, but where can they go? Maybe now in the United States there is a better climate, but that can also change, of course. And in the rest of Europe, we see the cancellation of the election in Romania, the ban of running for office in France from for Le Pen. Yeah, and also like the question states the campaign against AFD in Germany. We see in the UK Starmer's horrible policies, all in the name of liberalism. The lawfare in Belgium against Dries van Langenhoven. And also here in the Netherlands, we also see lawfare against our own politicians. So I really think it takes a long time, but I do think the gears of history are changing and shifting, and they cannot stop what has been initiated. The new world is emerging, a new illiberal world. But in the meantime, people of Germany, people of the Netherlands, people of Europe have to endure. But we will win in the long term.
So again, Vincent, I thank you very much for participating in this interview, and we keep in touch. Until next time.